I was watching a White Feather Tarot video last night, and she made a comment about how when things have been at one extreme for so long, sometimes they have to cross over to the other extreme before they can find their balance. And I was thinking, it's like, I personally referred to the whole, the back and forth of the pendulum many, many times. And I feel like, despite saying that, I think I managed to catch myself when she was talking about it to really realize that it's like, it does go back and forth, and it is a matter of coming back to balance. And I always forget about that coming back to balance thing. So it's like, for a good while, I was trying to avoid any talk about like church stuff at all, because I know I have some very angry feelings toward the ideologies of the church, and I, among many, 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 many others, have been, personally wounded emotionally by the systems that are in play, more or less because of it. And yet I kept trying to avoid talking about any of it at all, because it bothered me that I kept going so heavy and so dark and angry. It's like, I'm trying not to do that. So what the hell is the deal? Why do I keep going there? And I think a big part of it is the fact that I was trying not to do it, or not to go overboard with it. And the fact is, I still have some I still got healing to do on that end. And as I've said many times, I do not hold it against most of the people in the church. There are some that it's kind of a struggle not to. But it's just been really frustrating that I keep finding myself going to like the places that I've been trying to avoid. And I think that's part of the point, right? That I'm supposed to demonstrate my progress, I think, on going from one extreme to the balancing out part. And obviously there's still some work to be done there. But it was just kind of funny, because when she mentioned sometimes you have to cross over to the other extreme before it can go to balance, it's like, oh yeah, that does make sense. Like, shit. Even skating, I think I've personally demonstrated to myself many times, with the help of the universe, of course, and very nicely timed rocks. You have a whole lot of momentum going. Catch one of those little rocks, brings you to a screeching halt really quick, and that's not especially fun. But if it wasn't for the pavement, I would still cross over a little bit with that kind of momentum going. And I've tripped on a gap in the pavement one day and sent my phone flying out of my back pocket. And the other day I got my 10 miles in, I think, and then as my app was saying that I was at the 10-minute mark, or at the 10-mile mark, okay, so I was skating on the asphalt, and the stuff where they like patch it up, it's really sticky when it's hot or wet. It was kind of one of those times, and I think it felt like it reached up and grabbed my toe stop, and I just went down. And I had a good laugh at my expense. And there's somebody sitting in the car right where I did that. And they turned their lights on for a minute, and I like to think they were applauding me. Or at least letting me know I did have an audience, because that's always fun. Yeah. But it's like, it makes sense on that end that there's going to be some pushback, because otherwise when it comes to a screeching halt, that hurts too. But yeah, like trying to get and maintain balance. And then for a while I was doing really good with it. And then I started talking about things, and then it seemed like it would like kick me into the other side really fast and really hard. It's like, shit, here we go again. What am I doing? But as I'm finally allowing myself to talk about those things more, I feel like they are kind of balancing out a little bit. I mean, I still got some anger on that stuff. And this morning, before this morning, so my ex had a kid, and I was part of that kid's life from right before he turned 4 until right before he turned 11. So obviously those are some big formative years. And I actually met up with a chaplain I used to work with in the Guard for dinner shortly after I got back, and we were talking about that whole thing. And he said he would be surprised. No, he would not be surprised if Tyler reached out when he's old enough. Like if he just made the effort to check in with me. And he said he had stepkids that he and their mom got divorced, and a few years later they did reconnect. It's like, I was like, I have thought that many, many, many times. And yeah. But how can you be involved with somebody for that kind of time and it just be done when it's done? So yeah, I've thought about that before, especially from the standpoint of part of the reason I stayed with his dad as long as I did. Part of the reason I got as involved with his dad as I did was because I saw how he was getting run over, even at 3 years old. His mom and dad were actively doing stuff like sending him to the other parent after he'd been fully stocked up on or like he'd had a sugar binge, and then like give him some Coca-Cola, don't get excited, something like that, just so he was as wild as he could possibly be before they sent him back. It's like, why would you do that? It's like, this is a child who has no other choice. You, being the adult, have the decision to not do that, since you know that all that's going to happen is he's going to go to the other parent and piss them off because he's so wild, and then he's going to be the one that gets in trouble. It's like, that doesn't come back to you, that comes back to him, so why would you do that? And it's... Luckily, that quit, at least for the most part. But it's like, why do you need somebody to come in and be the adult and say, hey, this isn't fair to the child. You know, why can we not already be an adult and recognize how it's going to affect the child? And yet so many people have the tendency to do exactly those kinds of things, and the kids are the ones that suffer, you know. And anyway, this morning, I don't even know, I was trying to ease into my day like I normally do, but I was a little, not really wound up, but I knew that I was going to be hanging out with my mom and my grandmother, and well, that's fine. I also know how exhausting it is. And so I was trying to get myself in a good mood for it, get in a good headspace, and I felt like it just was not working out so well. I mean, I didn't feel like I was in a bad spot when I left, but it didn't take long before it's like, oh, I'm not reacting in any way like I would have wanted to had I sufficiently prepared myself for all of this, you know. And really it started last night, because there again, it wasn't an asking about doing it. It was, well, since so-and-so didn't do it, it's falling to us to do it. And it's like, whoa, how come I'm not being asked about doing it? You know, because my mom or my grandma needed to get something for my niece for her birthday. It's like, you know what? If you ask, chances are I'd be open to it, because I needed to get her something too. Her birthday party is like in 2 days. So, yeah. You know, but we had no game plan. It was the place she had wanted to go originally ended up being like close to an hour drive, and she decided she did not want to do that, so we had a change of plans. But still, since it wasn't being asked, just voluntold, and it don't do well with those being voluntold to do stuff. You know, because it really, why would it be such a problem to actually put forth the effort to ask and be decent about it? Why do we have to say, oh, you're stuck doing this now? It's like, and technically my mom was like, we're stuck. It's like, sounds like you volunteered to. So, but yeah, it's just aggravating. But anyway, so it's one of those things where kind of like that nice voice in my head that eases me into showing me issues where I still have healing to do. Today, it went back with, you know, I had a scenario that popped into my head where my former stepson randomly showed up on my porch one day and wanted to reconnect after disconnecting, and to some extreme, with his parents once he's old enough, because there ain't no doubt in my mind he'll consider that. But you know, like, since I saw how he was getting dumped on and how nobody was there to give him a voice while his parents were bickering like little children, and doing shit just to piss each other off, that was probably one of the bigger reasons I ended up as deeply as involved as I did. Not ideal, obviously, but alas, like I've said before, I wasn't there for my ex. I was there to help his son and his brother and facing things that would come up because of his stupid decisions that he was making, and his tendency to want to fuck with anyone's head. He could, just because he could. So I have this scenario pop into my head, and in it, her son is really upset and tells me things went further to shit after I left. It's like, well, that I fully would not be surprised of at all. But you know, I'm thinking through the scenario and in the situation, or in my, you know, my future plans. You know, I'm with somebody else at that point and trying to find my happily ever after, if you will. And then he randomly shows up. He's like, well, you left and then things went to shit. And it's like, well, things were already shit. But, you know, and I started talking about how, well, so in the last several months that I was there, it became a common thing for my ex to tell me that he should have raped me when he had the chance. And so, coming from that approach, it's like, dude, I had to go. There was no other options. It was time for me to leave that situation, and I couldn't do anything more than I already had, and I wasn't real happy with what I had done as far as, you know, like helping his dad get custody of him. That, honestly, that bothered me about as much as the fact that his mom was the other option for him. And his mom was not any better. But once my ex got custody, he ended up down there with us, and my ex is saying this shit to me all the time, and he was doing that before we got the kid. He's like, I went back down in August. We didn't get the kid down there with us until November or December, and then it just got worse. But because I knew I could count on his narcissism to force him to play the part of better than the other option, I knew at least if the court said that he had to go to therapy, then that kid would be in therapy. And before I left, I did let that therapist know why I was leaving, and that it wasn't a good situation anyway, you know, but I couldn't do anything more with it, and I didn't think he would, you know, physically do anything anything too much. Well, he wasn't the I don't even know how to, but you know, his approach to life is more of fucking with everyone else's head, so everybody thought that he was, you know, as wonderful as he thought he was, basically. And so in the scenario, it's like, you know, I'm talking to the kid and saying, look, I mean, he was, you know, over 18 at that time, and just saying there was no other choice. It's like one of the last things I said to the kid that week. It was really, I think, the biggest key for me that it was time to get my ass up out of there before I said or did anything else that was not who I knew myself to be at the deepest levels. I don't even remember what he was doing, but he was kind of, something he was doing was just like his mom and dad. And I was so worn out and exhausted from everything else, and now, getting this kid to school is a problem, and it's my problem, and now he's being difficult too. And I just said, not really under my breath, but kind of, great, he's turning into a shit just like his parents. And it's like, that is enough. That is a kid. We are not going to that level. We are not doing that anymore. It is time to go. And, that never should have been said, no. But it's like I spent all that time trying to show him he did not have to end up like his parents. And then when he was starting to do something that was very much like his parents, then it's like, I called it out, and that part I don't disagree with. Approach definitely was not good. But it just got me thinking. It's like how it's like every time I allowed the world around me to influence who I was allowing myself to be, it's like I would say or do something and it's just like, that is not you, that is not acceptable, knock that shit out. And that, I think that was probably the biggest regret that I had in my dealings with his kid in the entire time that I knew him. And it was an ugly ending all around. But he was, the kid was seeing us fight more and more, and I don't know if he was in the room the night his dad was chasing Taz around trying to kick him. I think, actually, now that I'm thinking about it, I think he was in the kitchen having dinner, and I got up in my ex's face right in the entryway of the kitchen, because that was where I caught him standing between him and the dog that he was actively chasing through the house to try to kick. And I've never been really good with aggressive words in anger. And I think I told him he needed to calm, or let's see, how do I say that? Something about leaving my dog alone and backing the fuck off before we really have an issue or something. And he just had this sadistic laugh as he was like, there it is, that is exactly what I needed from you the whole time. And then he starts into this, it was kind of like, the way he said it was real talking down to me, while also kind of like poking the bear with the stick kind of a idea. Like, we both knew he didn't have any respect for me, and least of all in the time I stood up for him. But since I did get up in his face, as he had been wanting me to do for a long time, it didn't get any better. I guess the bonus would be that there was a police officer living across the street, so I guess if anything had gone further. But, how long does that take? All the same. And I had these... Okay, first off, he had been, especially, more so in the last couple weeks, once he knew that I was leaving, he'd start telling me things like, aside from the rape, should have raped me when he had the chance statement, stuff like he was noticing that sometimes he got so angry he could see himself accidentally killing someone someday. It's like, I knew that was directed to me. And I knew at that point, he was done with me anyway. He got his kid. That was all he wanted me for, as somebody to fight his custody battle so he didn't have to do the work. He could just show up and it'd all be done and he'd just look freaking rosy. So anyway, in this conversation in my morning mind wanderings, daydreams, whatever, I just told I was thinking through this stuff and telling his kid, it's like there was nothing else I could do. I had to leave. And, then of course, I'm laying there in bed crying about it this morning because it's like that whole situation fucking sucked. And, yeah. But it really, I think, forced me to face another thing that I've been working toward healing. And, it's like, how many times do you have to revisit something before it's actually good and healed and out of your system? It's like, well, so far it's not completely there, obviously, since I'm still telling these stories again. But as in some of the other wanderings I've done, I feel like the biggest part of my purpose in doing this whole YouTube thing and airing my dirty laundry, if you will, is just the fact of showing people that the healing process isn't pretty, and maybe somebody can relate to something I have to say, and maybe it makes them remember something they've been through, and then helps them to be able to confront it in their own lives. Because I think that's the biggest thing right there. Is that's healing's always been my greatest life mission, I guess, if you will. And helping others to be able to find healing as well. And I never really knew what that looked like. I mean, it makes sense that it'd be a sort of talk therapy for me, which might give other people the opportunity to consider their own stories from a different angle. And start to be able to process through them themselves. That's really the hardest part. Have to feel it to heal it, and that feeling it is not fun. Especially when you got to revisit it 5,000 times to get there. But it's worth it. Pause this for a second. Anyway, so that was kind of my morning, and then I go hang out with my mom and my grandma in those just completely exhausted. And when I left my grandma's house before my mom did, and my dad was over there watching something with my grandpa because we had him run over and check on my grandpa because he called us and wasn't sounding so good, and he just got done mowing even though nobody in the neighborhood was around to help him if he needed it. We don't really like for him to be mowing if somebody's not at least home in either of the neighbor houses, for the family. And he did, and then he called us. I was like, how long are you going to be? And he was sitting in the garage and needed water. It's like, couldn't wait, could you? It's like, we weren't gone that long. But no. So yeah, when my mom finally got back home, she was like, I feel exhausted. I was like, yes. It's like, as a matter of fact, that's how I always feel when I'm involved with hanging out with the family for extended periods of time. But, you know, it's exhausting, I guess. Now I feel like I need to just do all my things this evening to make sure to clear my aura of any of the heaviness. Oh, and that was another thing. Like yesterday, when my mom and I were having this conversation where I was getting voluntold that I had to help with this thing, or this field trip, my aunt, who is in Florida on vacation, got her Facebook account hacked into, and they got fully in there and had posted something which had been the link she clicked on, which was a bunch of pictures like a golf cart and a generator and all this other stuff, and one of those sob story messages of, my dad just got moved to aged care and he could really use the money, so we're trying to sell these things. You know, she goofed and clicked into it and then got locked out of her own account. And so I was on my social media more than I normally am, and I really didn't want to be, but I was trying to help her and my mom figure out what we needed to do as far as helping her, and she ended up closing the original account because that was an option they apparently let her do, and you know, then I had to go on my mom's, and because she clicked into it, it's like, all right, since you clicked the thing, you need to get on there and change your password first. It's like, and secondly, we're trying to figure out what's going on with her stuff, because somebody sent us messages asking for our phone numbers because Facebook requested a trusted friend to send the link to or whatever, and it's like, yeah, no, we're not doing that. You know, there's been a couple times that my aunt has had people, okay, this one, and there was one other time, but the other one was they started an Instagram account, which she does not have, and they started messaging me in her name. I just sent her a text message. I was like, hey, you don't have an Instagram, right? She said no, and I said, that's funny, because somebody just started one in your name. And I was like, hey, just out of curiosity, how do you know me? And yeah, that always pisses them off. It's like, well, since you can't tell me how she knows me, you're clearly not her anyway. Yeah, and I reported the account, and I think it got gone. I don't know how all that ended up working out, aside from me blocking stuff to avoid having to deal with it any further. And I reported it as pretending to be somebody. So that's fun. But in social media, it's like they don't even have live bodies doing half the shit anymore. So you gotta rely on AI bots for half this bullshit, and they're not very good at knowing what's real and what's fake. And yeah. Anyway, that was a hot mess. It was like just that heavy negative energy. It's like I was on Facebook long enough, then I got sidetracked and started looking at people's comments and replied to a couple of my friends' posts, and it's like, this feels like shit. And I kind of feel like I want to go back in there and just save my pictures, or like my old pictures that I might want out, and get rid of the account completely, because every time I get on there, it makes me feel like crap. And, and nothing like not being on there makes me realize that anymore. So, yeah. It was an ordeal yesterday, too. It's like, I took my dog to the vet for his shots, and he had a couple things due, and not just the one thing. Like, I do the annual Pro Heart injections on him, so I don't have to worry about the heart guard stuff all year. But then forgot how much his big butt cost on that, and ended up having to borrow like $56 from my mom. It's like, get paid tomorrow, and my aunt will pay me when she gets back. But I just hate having to ask, and I know that is a big part of why I am there too, because the idea of asking for help from my family kind of makes me sick, to be honest. And it's one of those where I feel like the big question is, well, you're clearly not doing enough to make enough money to handle this right now. And it's like, you know what? It's like I'm trying to do all this freaking healing crap, and they're just wiping me out. And I do have little odd jobs that I pick up where I can, and it's just exhausting. It is exhausting. But it's like, it always feels like two things simultaneously. Like, you're not doing enough, you're not working hard enough, if you can't currently pay what needs to be paid. And the other end of it is, hot damn, she's indebted to us. She can't leave now. Or she's got to be able to do this, and blah, blah, blah. Neither one of those are happy things. And, I feel like, I know there are many family systems where people get taken advantage of in that way. At the same time, it's like, I've spent literally my entire life contending with my mom living vicariously through me, and feeling like I had to do everything to appease her and make her happy, and it didn't get me anywhere. Like, what it got me was a bunch of school debt. That, like, if it had been up to me, now that I look back at it, I would probably have taken some time off between high school and undergrad to try to figure out what I liked to do, and I probably would have, I picked up a trade or something. Like, that would have been fine, but it was such a big deal that I had to go to school, because it was always her biggest regret that she hadn't. I was like, okay, well, like delaying my figuring myself out and what I wanted to do. Yeah. She's like, what a fucking mess. You know, and I know writing, and I've known writing for a long time, but I feel like, you know, like, okay, like all the emotional trauma around like sexual issues and whatnot, and how, you know, creativity and sexuality are both connected to the sacral chakra. So if you have any emotional trauma, as I had much of on that end, your creativity gets locked up in it, and until you do the healing work. And so, okay, that's now, you know, and sometimes the creativity stuff works better than others. And like, at least right now, like, I don't really feel like this is necessarily a creative endeavor with this YouTubing extravaganza, but it's basically my talk therapy, and it is getting it out of my system at different layers, so I can heal it. And because I am doing that work, I am starting to be able to write more and starting to be able to focus on creative endeavors more. You know, but it's still very easy to get caught up in the heaviness of the stuff that hasn't been completely worked out yet. And fucking sucks. Yeah, but it's like part of the process, right? So, I was telling my cousin the other day, when I was in undergrad, Ball State had this thing called Ask Charlie Cardinal. It was basically kind of a Dear Abby kind of a thing, that students could write in anonymously. And there was one day in my first semester, I wrote in to this thing, and it was a big long spiel. What I got back was talking about the counseling center has free services available for students. She's like, just slam the door on that too. Because at that time, I wasn't really ready to work through some of it. So that was my first year. And then my second year, I ended up rooming with a girl I'd met in my Bible study group. And we would have these really long conversations, and she would just let me ramble. And, you know, I remember laying on the floor one night, and she was, I think, on her bed, and I was just kind of talking through some stuff. I was like, why does it seem like all these traumatic events all happened between the time I was 7 and 10? You know, I don't remember exact ages on some of the things, but as I've been processing them in these later years, I'm starting to find where they fit in more. Yeah, hold on, I'm gonna have to blow my nose because that's gonna be gross. Anyway, so it was like, even back then, it's like talking through it has helped. Yeah, it's gonna annoy me too. A little shark fin. Anyway, you know, and I think back in those days I was kind of afraid to go to the counseling center because I was afraid that, they'd try to diagnose me with something, pin me to something that I could never escape in my life. I don't want that. I feel like anything can be worked through. It's a matter of being, I think, brave enough on some things to confront the darkest sides of yourself. Yeah. And battery, okay. I'm glad that I had the roommate I did back then, because I was able to process through some things, and then the girl that was our Bible study leader, who met for one-on-ones occasionally, and she called me out on how every time I would express any kind of frustration, it was always that, I would say. It was frustrating. I wouldn't say something had flat out pissed me off. I wouldn't say that, or I wouldn't address things that were completely agonizing in my life or whatever. It was always just annoying or frustrating. And she's like, call it what it is. If you're pissed off, say you're pissed off. It's and that took some time to warm up too, because trying to be a good girl and that just do good girls do pissed off? I didn't think so. And my church experiences seem to support that women were lesser across the board. But then to go along with the mental health stuff, talked about that in other videos too. It's there are some mental health diagnoses in my family. It's I have had moments where I've had experiences that showed me what a particular thing would look or feel like. The other day I mentioned when I was in undergrad that I had a day where I was on my way home from school and I was living off campus, and I just heard all these voices yelling at me and laughing at me and all this sadistic talk and creepy stuff. And then it got to the point where when I was at the house by myself, which is one of the only times I was ever in that house by myself, I thought I was on the verge of a mental break. And it's well, that runs in my family too, so got 6 miles in now. But yeah, just it's and I had a psych class after that, and we listened to an audio I think it was the next week, and it was, this is what it sounds like for somebody that's having a schizophrenic episode. It's oh fuck, that's what it was. And then when I look back at it now, it's I see it as something completely different. I will completely own up to what I was seeing and hearing and doing when I thought I was having a meltdown. But Abraham Hicks talks about running into thought forms, and how if you're in an area that has had a traumatic event of some sort take place, the collective anxieties, fears, angers, and all that stuff kind of collect in the energy field. It's oh. And I was listening to, like, I listen to some music where it sounds like the singers are like just going back and forth. I call it demon chatter because it's like you can't really understand what anybody's saying, but you can tell different people are saying it, and it just kind of bounces back and forth. It's like, I kind of feel like that's what that is. It's like just the intense energies adding together, and because there's so many of them in the big scheme of things, since we have to see them, face them, process them to release them, it's like it comes to a lot of us as things we have to deal with, and then things that further freak us out because I thought I was having a mental breakdown, and yeah, and I always knew I didn't want any kind of diagnosis, because it's like, well, if you get diagnosed with something and then you're just kind of forever bound to having had a certain diagnosis, and I think there's a lot more to health and healing than the medical field. It can be helpful, obviously, but at the same time, they don't know everything. And like with mental illness, even, like looking at things that were put in the original DSMs versus taken out later. Like, at one point, homosexuality was in there as a mental disorder. And why? Because somebody said it was weird. Somebody disagreed with it, so therefore they get to make the decisions and put the things in the book that other people have to rely on. Yeah, like hysteria too. Like that was seen as a woman's disorder, and basically, going back, this is where it's largely connected to church ideologies. Okay, if you're telling everybody that basically it's wrong to be female, or it's wrong to be a female confronting anger, or anything sexually on either side, male or female, it's like some of the shit that's been seen as disorders is like perfectly normal and demonstrated as normal in like other animal species, but yet that's supposed to be something special for humans. I don't know. And I know that a lot of the delay in my being able to face the bullshit that I've been through in my lifetime has been, fear of being seen as weak or mentally ill or whatever other bullshit labels people want to come up with. And I think that's why healing is so hard for anybody who wants to try to do it. And it's kind of nice that we now are seeing more and more people encourage therapy and talking through things as a form of processing and releasing, because there's definitely something to it that they definitely help. But I think that's kind of a big part of why I'm meant to go this route, is because I've spent my whole life listening to people who've tried to impose this idea that I'm a whore or something onto me, and then finding out when I was finally able to process it years later that I didn't do anything that they said I did, and they just pretty much made my life a living hell because they could. And I know that other people have gone through things. Okay. I always knew that divorce was something that I was going to have to face in my lifetime, because I knew that my family was so entirely opposed to it. And there are those systems in place where like at what point in time could a woman get a credit card or bank account or anything along that line without having her husband's permission, or anything like that? Like even for me, when I was taking out money from my retirement account that I had before I ever had my ex, I still had to have him sign the document to say it was okay for me to take this money out of my account. It's like, what kind of bullshit is this? It's like a lot. a lot. And I know that is why I've had to go through some of the things that I have, and even actively choosing to go through things. Like I remember when I was in high school standing there in church, and that voice that was always there checking in on me, it's like he was opening wide the veil to show me that there's something more on the other side, and I just needed to remember to trust myself and what I knew, to get there. And I remember thinking, if even one person benefits from me going through this experience, then it will have been worth it. And that's pretty much how I've lived my entire life. Is like, if one person can benefit from my experience, then it'll have been worth it. But it still doesn't make it hurt any less to have to go through it, or to have to try to heal from it afterwards. Anyway, I actually feel a lot better, partly because I'm skating and partly because I've been rambling this whole time. I knew this morning I wanted to do a video today and get some of the stuff cleared out of my system. Hey, this is why. So I'm going to go ahead and call it here and go focus on my skating. I should be close to 7 miles, so my head hurts too. That's the other joy of healing. Lots of that. Anyway, as always, I appreciate you whether you made it this far or not, and until the next time, see you later.